Hey, on today's episode of the History Makers Leadership Podcast, we're continuing in a series of conversations around Carey Nieuwhof's 7 church trends for 2026. And really in the meat here, we're going to be talking about 3 of the core elements for really churches in general, in church leadership, discipleship, evangelism. What is preaching looking like and what does it need to look like in the future? What's the impact of the algorithm on the growth and discipleship of our people? And how do people really step into evangelism on their own? It's going to be a great conversation with Norval Trindade as we break down these 3 elements of church trends today. Well, Norval, I really enjoyed our conversation looking at those 7 church trends that Carey Nieuwhof kind of pointed out. We looked at the first 2 in the last episode, but today I'd love to look at just some of these other trends that he's seeing. And one of them was really succinctly, he describes it this way. He says, evangelism is getting bolder and more direct. What do you think about that?
You know, it's an interesting trend because I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before that he said something akin to evangelism is dying. And he was pointing out that the vast majority of pastors state that their people don't know how to evangelize. But also they are people that a small percentage of Christians invite others into to visit their church, even though something around 70, a large majority, 80% of people would go if invited by a friend or family member. Well, there's a disconnect there.
Oh man, I think there's a massive disconnect. I think we live in a cultural age where there has been increasing openness to those kinds of invitations. And yet I think the invitations are happening fewer and far between, probably because we just, again, particularly in America, but even in the larger West, we believe that we'll be rejected even though we've never tried.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And it's sad. It was probably about a year and a half ago, I started doing some reading and research around this very topic. And it was looking at some old Barna research. Barna did like a 20-year survey, right? So it was like 1993 to 2023, kind of, I guess it'd be 30 years worth of gap between those 2 dates. And this was the trend that I found most interesting from that. They found that most of the believers saw evangelism as a personal responsibility in the 90s. But in the 2000s, it moved to a church responsibility. They kind of depersonalized the responsibility of evangelism. Now, Norval, we believe that the most effective Christian leaders today are practicing culturally relevant evangelism.
Right, yeah.
But maybe we should even kind of construct what that word is. Because you know what? I don't think inviting somebody to church is evangelism.
Absolutely. That's one of the misconceptions is that inviting somebody to a church service or presentation equals evangelism.
Well,
pre-evangelism at best.
Oh, at best, yeah. Now, to be clear, I think we want to go on record. Inviting people to church is a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing.
And you should. Everybody should, especially because statistics say most people would accept that invitation rather than rejecting. But the issue, there's 2 issues. First, the mixing up, inviting to church with evangelism. Evangelism is sharing your story of faith and pointing to Jesus, sharing the gospel.
Amen.
And that's what evangelism is, not inviting to church. The other thing is, when they say evangelism is a responsibility of the church, they're not wrong.
Right.
Except that the church is not the building.
That's it.
They are the church.
That's right. The church isn't the pastor on the stage. It's not the Sunday school teacher in the front of the classroom. The church is the gathered body of believers, and it's each member of that body. And when we go back to even words like gospel, it's good news. And so when we share the good news, that's what we're sharing, right? I'm so quick to remind people. I've never had to teach someone to celebrate.
Yeah.
They just do it, right? You don't have to teach your kids to celebrate the win at the soccer field or the football field or wherever. They just know that they've experienced that and they are celebrating. And that celebration is always communal, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that your favorite team score and just sit on the couch quietly with your hands in your lap. You jump up, you celebrate, and that's a natural human response. And I think it's a gift from God. The gospel, that good news, is something that should be celebrated, and that's the context out of which we share it.
Yeah, exactly. And I recently read, I believe it was a Dallas elder that wrote that evangelism or the church grew in the beginning through gossip. Because basically what people did is, hey, do you know that that Jewish rabbi that was preaching around, doing miracles and doing that, and that they killed him at the on the cross? Oh yeah, guess what? He rose from the dead, and I saw him. So essentially, that's that was the gospel. What's the good news? He died. Everybody saw him die.
Yeah.
He came back to life.
That's it.
And therefore he is God. So but it was funny that it grew through gossip because people they will tell their neighbors, they'll tell their friends, hey, you know what? You know that guy? Yeah. Or if you're in Philippi or in Corinth, it's, hey, have you heard that story about that Jewish guy over there in the province of Judea? Well, guess what? He came to life, and I know a guy that saw him.
That's it.
In person.
Well, and I think what Carrie's pointing out here is, in some senses, I think there are some elements that are returning to that, right? He talks about how there are some church leaders who are still sharing clips of sermons, and that's good. We need, we can learn from those kinds of things. But he's witnessing a next generation of evangelists that are really directly sharing the gospel through the lens to another individual, and I think there's a powerful reality that the individual believer is increasingly stepping into a place where they're engaging and sharing that good news story from their own life into the life of another person.
Exactly. Now, one aspect of this bold evangelism that he is talking about, which is different than the evangelism is dying from the past report, is that back there, he was talking about evangelism in the church.
Yeah.
Here, evangelism pretty much bypasses the church, even though it points to it. All evangelism should point to the church and to discipleship, but it bypasses the church, and it's individuals or organizations or movements on campuses and on marketplace and on the streets and whatnot that are proclaiming the gospel outside and without any sometimes official connection to the church. And as I was reading that, Daniel, it dawned on me that it mirrors something else that has happened with the emergence of social media.
Okay.
We all talk about, well, where do you get your weather?
Oh, yeah, I get it on this thing.
On YouTube.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I've learned with you to go to these 2 or 3, meteorologist influencers who record their own videos. And they got a million followers, and they make a living out of it. And so what happened is when the news moved to social media, and whether it's YouTube video influencers or it was Facebook and now Instagram
or TikTok
or
whatever.
which so it has, they say, news information bypassed the gatekeepers.
That's right.
The network televisions, the Associated Press, Reuters, and those agencies that are out there doing journalism. And so they talk about how bad it is because you don't have corroborating sources. You don't follow the rules of journalism, and perhaps this kind of evangelism doesn't follow some rules of proper theological proclamation because it bypasses the church, just like the news bypassed the quote-unquote news organizations.
Well, Norvald, listen, you're talking to a house church guy, so I'm always going to defer to, I think, that kind of evangelism better reflects the early church. It was very organic. It was very messy. The reason we have half the letters we have is because there was mess ups along the way.
Exactly.
All of that is a part of learning to discover and learning to practice the way. That process, I think, is a reflection of so many good elements of the early church. Now, I understand, and I don't want to disparage any of our high church brothers or sisters. I acknowledge a lot of those protections are good things, right? I've received that and recognize that those structures aren't bad or evil. It's only an acknowledgement that when it comes to sharing this news, it's going to be a little messy, and I'd rather it be a little messy and the news be shared than for it to be perfectly punctuated and kept in the silence of the four walls. There's a movement that we've been connected to for a long time, and I just love the name because it speaks to the heart behind it. And it's a movement called Beyond These Walls.
Yep.
And that's the whole focus. We want to be beyond the walls because that's not that's not the gathering we're here for. We're here to help the whole world know, wait a second, the good news, God made a way for you to know him, to walk with him, to experience the abundant life that he comes to bring and offer, to give answering to sorrow and suffering, to give hope in the midst of trial or difficulty, and to give a promise for a future. This is good news. He gave it through his own son. Wow, what an incredible gift. I think that renewal and that reintegration of evangelism in the life of the individual is a good thing. And that's where I think, again, practicing culturally relevant evangelism has never been more vital for the Christian leader than this moment.
Absolutely. And then, of course, it cannot stop at the proclamation or evangelism.
It can't.
Like we said in the last episode, Jesus didn't call us to make converts. He called us to make disciples.
That's right.
And the next trend has to do with that. And it's a sobering one.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it? It says, I don't know what you think about this, Daniel.
Yeah.
Discipleship is now largely controlled by algorithm. And pastors are paying a huge price for that. Discipleship is now largely controlled by algorithms.
Wow. I think this is where I would start playing with word nuance. Okay. Here's what I think he's probably trying to communicate. How are people learning about Jesus? Well, they're learning where they've been learning. People are learning in this, right? The sum of human knowledge is at their fingertips, right? I was at the Library of Congress in the United States, the world's largest library, okay? They've got something like 50 massive warehouses out in the desert just holding books, millions and millions and millions of books, right? It used to be you had to go to a place like that to learn all the things. I have it right here.
Yep.
With the internet at my fingertips, even with the advent of AI, you have so much more knowledge. So the acquiring the knowledge, this is where people are coming. And so if the question is, how are people learning about Jesus? They're learning a lot of it through this little rectangle that they carry in their pocket. And that is very much filtered by the algorithm of their choice, whether that be Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever.
It's feeding them what they want to hear.
It's feeding them what they want to hear, and it's feeding them what others have already social proofed, even if it's not true. Right? And so there's a real sobering thing for pastors. We got to realize, hey, there's never been a more critical moment for deep relationship to be the fundamental foundation for discipleship. If we believe that discipleship is purely an intellectual exercise of, I know X fact about Jesus, then you know what? They're going to learn that, and they're going to learn that from a bunch of different places. But the way of Jesus was to walk with them, to be in relationship with them, and to make them people who could do that with others, right? 2 Timothy 2:2, right? These things that you've heard and trust others will be faithful to teach others also is an instruction about learning and growing. But I also think it's a connection back to, wait a second, hey, the way I taught you, Timothy, was to be in relationship with you. Right? Evidenced by our travels together, but also evidenced by these letters I'm writing to you. Right. I am in relationship with you, Timothy. This is how you've got to be in relationship with other people to make disciples who are making disciples. That is the critical piece that I think a lot of pastors today and a lot of Christian leaders in general are going to have to come to terms with. It's no longer how much content can you produce, how much information do you have to share. It's how are you maintaining, building, establishing, and furthering relationships with people and prioritizing that enough in your calendar to make it meaningful, resulting in Christ-like transformation.
And you talked about content versus connection. People are interested in content, but they're not even coming to church for content.
Mm-mm.
And that's why one of the trends, I think it's trend number 6 that we're gonna.
I think it's 4. 4 is one that looks at how the preaching is changing. Is that what you're thinking?
Preaching is changing. Yes.
Yeah.
Preaching is changing to shift from presentation to encounter.
Listen, I think he hit the nail on the head with this. I really do. I think the reality for pastors today, the reality for Christian leaders today, is we've got to recognize the world's best communicators are accessible to everyone via these devices. And if you think you're going to be a better communicator than the rest of the people on the planet, quite frankly, you're sadly mistaken. There's a different place for that to there's a different role, I think, for us to step into, and for Christian leaders, particularly those called to lead in a church context.
Right.
Hey, you've got to recognize it's not just about what you say from the stage, it's how you walk them in an experience together. That's the more meaningful thing. And I think one of the best ways to do that, you've got to live your life open and allowing them to engage. Now, I'll be honest, how do you do that when you've got 1,000 members or 2,000 members? I don't really have an answer for that, but you got to have your 12. You got to have your 12, and they've got to have their 12.
That's why a lot of people are gravitating towards smaller church. That's why many pastors are moving away from celebrity pastors to being more authentic and open and all of that. So
I do think this is a cultural moment where the greater value is being placed on authenticity and on sincerity of practice, faith. It's less about presentation and more about practice. And the more you can have that openness in your life for people to observe and to watch. I think of Paul. He says, "Look, follow my way. Look at me. Do this.
Follow me as I follow Christ. If I don't. But if I follow Christ, then go ahead and follow me."
That's a bold statement, but I think
it takes courage to say that.
It takes courage, but you know what I think it also comes with? The accountability that we need as leaders, right? I think sometimes by making that kind of a statement, you actually put you put yourself on notice to say, "Oh, I've invited the eyes. I better be doing it."
Right.
And that's where I think Christian leaders need to be developing and practicing. As we talk about it, the 8 core values that help them to live that fully balanced life.
Exactly.
Where it's not performance, it's not presentation, it's the whole counsel of God, the whole practice of saying, wait a second, no, hey, I'm not going to preach this Sunday. I'm going to ask someone else to preach. Why? Well, because I have to practice family priority. I have to practice multiplication of leadership. If I make the stage and the presence, my presence, the focus, we're going to be missing things. And I need people to see. I need people to see the humanity, the authenticity of my own life, my own walk, my own practice.
Yeah, and then those values lay a foundation and set yourself up to be able to say, "Follow me."
Yeah,
they follow Christ.
They do. They set you up for that success. And I think this plays back into the evangelism thing, where when we recognize, okay, the practices become more personal, they become more authentic, they become more integrated. So now my evangelism is an extension of not just my presentations on Sunday, right? It's not just about how I'm presenting the sermon. It's the experience of how we're doing this together. I'm sharing from my own life of how I'm preaching the gospel to people and engaging with people, and people are seeing that, or they're engaging with me on that. And it begins to shift from that algorithm to authentic relationship.
Yeah.
I think working those things together is it. So, all right, Norval, with these 3 in mind, okay, looking at how evangelism has become more direct and person to person, looking at how there's been some shift in how preaching is taking shape, and the impact of algorithms. what should Christian leaders today, what should we do because of some of these trends? What are some action steps we can take to make meaningful kingdom progress and impact as we kick off the year?
I think all of us, and it's every one of us, leader or not, we need to do a little bit of a mea culpa and realize the superficial model of Christianity of the 20th century just, it didn't work. That's why the church lost Europe, was superficiality. And so it's a matter of going back to the basics, discipleship again. But I'm looking at myself in the mirror now and realizing what is my life like?
Yeah.
What are some practices? Do I understand that there are practices that are historically effective to deepen my relationship with God? It is not a coincidence that the first core value that we teach is intimacy with God.
That's right.
And without that foundation, then everything else, we don't have anything to give. And the heartbreaking news is that the world is needing and desiring it.
Yeah.
We've said it many times. You can read it everywhere. Gen Z, they're ready for something of deep commitment. To me, I'm always amazed at the movement that has been going on in the campuses in the United States. It happened in several campuses where they will have a message, and then the altar call is not to come give your life to Jesus, is to turn to somebody next to you and confess your sins. And young people are turning to strangers or to their, roommates in college or classmates in college and saying, listen, I have a porn issue.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm addicted to gambling. I have anxiety and it paralyzes me. So they're confessing to each other and then praying for each other and being delivered into this radical. It's something really radical.
Well,
in terms of an embrace of the Christian faith. And I think that's what beats that superficial come to church once a week.
Yeah.
Wear the right clothes, say the right words, don't cuss, don't do this, don't do that. But there is no depth and there is no sacrifice in terms of there is no changing of the mind.
Yeah.
Renewal of the mind. And therefore there isn't an acceptable service to God. And therefore we can't discern the perfect will of God for us.
I think with that, it's the message for Christian leaders. It should be that there's a unprecedented longing to experience God. That longing is showing itself in the person to person evangelism. I think it's showing itself in the hey, I'm not just here for information. I can get information through the algorithm. I'm here for an experience with God. I think people are longing for an experience with God, and it's a critical moment where as Christian leaders, we want to introduce that. We want to facilitate that. We want to support that. And look, outpouring of the Holy Spirit, that's not under our control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So obviously we pray and
we just show up.
We just show up. And there are ways that I think we can experience God that are through his practices, through his word, through his fellowship of people gathered in praise and in worship. I think those are the things that, hey, Christian leader, those are the things you want to introduce. If it's in your business, recognize, hey, what are some ways that I can introduce people to some of those practices, some of those experiences that just helps them to see, hey, this is an encounter. This is an encounter that demonstrates the impact of God on his people. it doesn't always have to be, of course, we always pray and earnestly long for revival to break out and the Spirit to pour out onto people in a way where they experience His love and His grace and His embrace. And in that they experience God in the way that only God can make Himself manifest. But, my family had a chance to go to the Bible Museum recently. And there was a beautiful exhibit in Orval. It was called All Creation Sings. And it's wonderful if anybody's got a chance to go to it. It's absolutely worth it. I wasn't exactly sure what I was walking into when I went, but I thought, we're here, let's do it. And just this beautiful exhibit that starts with Genesis 1 and it moves forward through time and space and history, talking about the ways in which people in God's creation has praised, honored, and glorified and magnified God. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting, I'm just taking it in. And it's like a totally immersive thing, right? Like 4 walls all being projected onto just this very beautiful immersive thing, lots of beautiful imagery. And I'm just reflecting on the glory of God and the beauty of His creation and how everything points to Him. And I'm getting a little choked up, kind of thinking about it and kind of reflecting on, I don't know, just all the different things. And I look over at my 11-year-old daughter and she's crying. I mean, there are tears rolling down her face. And I realized, oh yeah, like this is Spirit, you're working in the midst of this as we simply reflect on, wait, yeah, right? The heavens declare the glory of the Lord, right? That's a real thing. And when we get the space to pause and reflect on that and even have that kind of thrust in front of us, it's transformational. So for the Christian leader today, I think some of these trends point to put people in a moment where they can experience God and His presence and go to the things that He's already given us to make that happen. He's given us the church. He's given us the gathered body, right? He's given us His word. He has given us creation and its beauty and majesty. And He's given us His Spirit. And I think if we can, as Christian leaders, step into those things, and introduce people into those things, it will bring transformation in people's lives. And this is the critical moment where I think people are yearning for the experience of God more than ever before. If they show up to a church or if they show up to my Bible study or they show up to whatever, and all they find is us, we're going to leave them wanting.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's never been a more critical moment for us to say, okay, God, we're here to experience You. And to step into it.
God is real. And it is acting as if He is.
Yeah.
And expecting Him to show up when we call upon Him.
That's right.
And He will.
He will. He will. And that's where, again, the top of this article, it talks about practicing and non-practicing Christians. And we already laughed about the kind of oxymoronic nature of that. But I think that's the real piece is, no, wait a second. When people start to see it and experience it, and they experience it through us, right? That's a means by which God extends His grace and helps people to see, wait a second, this is a transformational, real message in a world that is full of fake messages and false narratives, and AI generated slop. A critical moment. So as we talk about through some of these leadership trends, I think that would be my big takeaway. Anything to add to that, or any other thoughts on as we look at these 3 trends?
Yeah.
What do we do with this?
It's just pray. Just seek God. Hey, God, what do you want me to do next? He will show us the way.
That's right.
He will. If you look for Him, if you seek Him, if you ask, He will answer.
Amen.
Even atheists and agnostics and people without faith, when they cry out to God, a lot of conversion stories we read is like that. When they cry out to God, He answers, and all of a sudden they realize, oh yeah, He's real. So we already know that.
That's right.
Cry out to God. Let's cry out to God. Let's surrender to God, and let's do the next thing. We don't need to do great things. We just need to do the next thing.
That's beautiful. Well, Christian leaders, I want to encourage you. God is working through you. I think the best way to advance the gospel, I think the best way to advance the kingdom is through a local leader just like you. And listen, God has given you influence in a sphere, in a set of communities and circles where transformation is taking place, needs to take place and will take place because God is near. These trends are just some of the things in which we can see God moving. We want to help equip you to be the most effective Christian leader in your current context. The International Leadership Institute exists because the most effective way to advance the kingdom is a local leader. We want to help you do that. We believe the 8 core values are a great means to help you grow as a leader. Check out iliteam.org. There you'll discover those 8 core values and some more resources that can help you grow in your faith, your life, your leadership, so that you can be a part of God's bigger story here today. Thanks so much for joining us on the History Makers Leadership Podcast.